Your Honor, I run a billion-dollar company, not a charity. She did not fit the image we present, and I made the appropriate decision.
Have you ever noticed how a person's walk changes when they think they own the very ground they step on? Watch closely at the man entering my courtroom this morning. Marcus Sterling, 42 years old, wearing a $3,000 custom suit that fits him like armor. His chin is tilted just a fraction too high, his eyes scanning the room not for justice, but for anyone he considers beneath him. In the world of high-stakes technology, he is a titan, but in this courtroom, he is just another man who forgot that a suit can hide a heart, but it can never hide a character. If you are over 60, you've lived long enough to know that true power doesn't need to shout. You've seen how the world has changed, how efficiency and profit are often used as excuses to step on the people who built the foundation of our society. If you believe that the person who cleans the floor deserves the same dignity as the person who owns the building, then you need to stay with me for these next few minutes, because Marcus Sterling is about to learn that in my courtroom, a fancy watch doesn't make your time more valuable than anyone else's. Standing across from this titan is Mrs. Evelyn Miller. She is 68 years old, wearing a simple, faded blue cardigan, the kind of garment that has seen years of honest labor. Her hands are folded, and if you look at them, you'll see the story Marcus refused to read. Her knuckles are swollen from years of gripping a mop. Her skin is thin, revealing the blue veins of a life spent in service. She looks at the floor she once cleaned, her eyes filled with a quiet strength that only comes from decades of resilience. For 15 years, Evelyn was the silent ghost of Sterling Tech. She arrived at 9 p.m. and left at 5 a.m. She knew every office, every secret, every trash can. And 10 days ago, Marcus Sterling fired her not for a mistake, not for a theft, but because her presence ruined the aesthetic of the new corporate lobby during a high-profile investor visit. "Judge," Marcus said, his voice carrying that smooth, practiced arrogance of a man used to giving orders, "this should be a quick dismissal. Mrs. Miller was an at-will contractor. Her contract was terminated legally. My time is worth $5,000 an hour. Can we expedite this?" I didn't answer right away. I took off my glasses and looked at him. I didn't see a CEO. I saw a boy who had never been told no. I saw the TMAO of his soul, a buildup of ego that had completely blocked his ability to see a human being in front of him. The courtroom went silent. The red light of the camera blinked, recording every twitch of his jaw. Marcus checked his watch, a gold Patek Philippe. He thought he was in control. He thought his status was a shield. He was about to find out that the shield was made of glass, and I was about to throw the first stone. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice as calm as the eye of a hurricane, "before we talk about your time and its supposed value, I have one question, and I suggest you think very carefully before you answer it." The gallery held its breath. Evelyn Miller looked up, her tired eyes meeting mine. The story was just beginning, and the titan had no idea he was standing on quicksand. The silence in the room stretched for 10 full seconds. In a courtroom, 10 seconds feels like an eternity. It is the sound of a person's conscience trying to find an exit. Marcus Sterling shifted his weight. He didn't look at Mrs. Miller. Instead, he adjusted his silk tie, a nervous habit of those who believe that if they just look perfect enough, the truth won't be able to find them. I watched his eyes. They were restless, scanning the high ceiling of the courthouse, as if looking for a distraction. This is what I call the arrogance gap. It's the space between who a person thinks they are and the reality of how they treat those they think they don't need. "Mr. Sterling," I repeated, leaning forward so my shadow fell across his expensive mahogany folder. My question was simple. On the night you decided to fire Mrs. Miller, did you look her in the eye? Or did you simply look at her uniform and decide it didn't match your brand? Marcus scoffed, a dry, sharp sound that echoed off the marble walls. "Your Honor, I don't micromanage janitorial staff. I have 3,000 employees. I focus on global expansion, not who empties the trash cans." She was in the lobby during the visit from the Singapore delegation. She looked out of place. It's about the image of the company. A billion-dollar firm cannot look like a charity ward. Did you hear that? Out of place. If you are listening to this right now, and you've ever felt like your years of experience, your loyalty, and your hard work were dismissed just because you didn't fit the image of someone younger or wealthier, then you know the sting in Evelyn's heart at that moment. But look at Evelyn. She didn't flinch. Her spine remained as straight as the day she started working 40 years ago. Her face, etched with the wisdom of someone who has survived more than Marcus could ever imagine, remained calm. This is the quiet power that Marcus was too blinded by his own ego to see. I turned to the bailiff. Please show the court the evidence submitted by the defense. A screen flickered to life. It was a security feed from the night of the incident. There was Marcus, surrounded by men in dark suits, walking through a lobby that shone like glass. And there, in the corner, was Evelyn. She wasn't in the way. She was standing perfectly still, her mop bucket tucked neatly behind a pillar, waiting for them to pass. She had even tilted her head down, a gesture of respect she had been taught as a child. But Marcus didn't just walk past. In the video, you can see him stop. You can see him point a finger at her. He didn't say a word to her face. He turned to his assistant and made a cutting motion across his throat. The universal sign for "get rid of her." "Is that you, Mr. Sterling?" I asked. "It is," he snapped. "And as you can see, she was an eyesore. That lobby cost $20 million to renovate. Her bucket was leaking gray water onto the Italian marble. It was a liability." I looked at the video again. I didn't see gray water. I saw a reflection. I saw the reflection of a man who had become so obsessed with the Italian marble that he forgot the person cleaning it was a human being with a mortgage, a family, and a soul. "A liability," I whispered. "Interesting choice of words, Mr. Sterling, because in my experience, the biggest liability in any building isn't a leaking bucket. It's a leader who has lost his humanity." The gallery began to murmur. Marcus's lawyer whispered something in his ear, his face pale. But Marcus just crossed his arms, his Patek Philippe gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He still thought he was winning. He still thought the at-will clause in her contract was a magic wand that would make this go away. He didn't know that I had already seen the documents he thought were buried. He didn't know that the one question I was about to ask next would turn his $20 million lobby into a house of cards. If you've lived long enough, you know that the most valuable things in life aren't kept in a bank vault. They are kept in the memories of how we treated others when we thought no one was watching. Marcus Sterling sat in his chair, tapping his fingers impatiently on the table. To him, this was a transactional dispute, a matter of contracts, clauses, and at-will employment. But for Evelyn Miller, this was about the only thing she had left after 15 years. Her dignity. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "you mentioned earlier that Mrs. Miller's presence ruined the aesthetic of your $20 million lobby. Tell me, does that aesthetic include the fact that on Tuesday nights, the air conditioning in the building is turned off to save costs, and Mrs. Miller worked in 90-degree heat for 8 hours straight without a single complaint?" Marcus blinked. For the first time, his practiced smirk faltered. I don't deal with utility schedules, Judge. That's facility management." "Of course you don't," I replied, "because when you look at a building, you see a monument to your success. When Evelyn looks at it, she sees every corner she scrubbed, so that your investors wouldn't see a single speck of dust on the marble you're so proud of." I turned to Evelyn. "Mrs. Miller, tell the court about the night of the investor visit, not what happened on the security camera, but what happened before the camera started recording." Evelyn stood up. She didn't need to adjust her clothes. Her posture was her armor. She spoke with a voice that was soft but carried the weight of 1,000 midnights. "Your Honor," she began, "that night one of the young assistants, a boy no older than my grandson, was so nervous he spilled a full cup of dark coffee on the white marble right before the CEO walked in with the guests. He was shaking. He knew he'd be fired. I saw him. I didn't say a word. I just got my bucket. I knelt on my old knees, and I scrubbed that floor until it shone like a mirror. I did it because I didn't want that boy to lose his job. I did it because that's what a person does. If you are a parent or a grandparent, you know that look on Evelyn's face. It's the look of someone who protects others, even those who don't deserve it. It's the human essence that people like Marcus have traded for a stock ticker. "And then what happened, Mrs. Miller?" I asked. "Mr. Sterling walked in," she continued, her voice trembling slightly now. "He didn't see the clean floor. He saw me. He looked at me like I was a stain that wouldn't come out. He didn't ask if the floor was ready. He just looked at his assistant and said, 'Why is that still here?' Not 'who is that?' 'What is that?'" The gallery let out a collective gasp. In that one word "that," Marcus Sterling had revealed the TMAO of his character. He hadn't just fired an employee. He had attempted to erase a human being. I looked at Marcus. The Titan was looking down at his mahogany folder, but he wasn't reading. His jaw was tight, the muscles corded like iron. He was realizing that in this room, his money couldn't buy silence, and his status couldn't change the fact that a 6-8-year-old woman in a faded blue cardigan was currently the most powerful person in the building. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "is it true that after you called her that, You also directed your legal team to withhold her final 2 weeks of pay because of damages to the brand. Marcus didn't look up. He didn't have an answer. The house of cards was starting to shake, and I was just getting started with the foundation. Have you ever noticed that people who talk the loudest about transparency are often the ones hiding the most in the dark? Marcus Sterling sat back, his arms crossed, a smug smile returning to his face. He believed he was safe. In his mind, he had already won because his high-priced lawyers had drafted a contract that allowed him to fire anyone for any reason. But Marcus forgot one thing. A contract can govern an employee, but it cannot override the law of humanity or the specific laws regarding the withholding of earned wages. Judge, Marcus's lawyer stood up, smoothing his suit. While the emotional testimony of Mrs. Miller is moving, it is legally irrelevant. My client exercised his right. The withholding of the final paycheck was due to a breach of the non-disparagement clause. Her bucket leaked, she caused a scene, and it cost the company reputation. I looked at Marcus. I saw the way his left eye flickered when his lawyer mentioned the word reputation. In physiognomy, that small twitch is often a sign of a suppressed lie, a physical manifestation of the TMAO of deceit. Mr. Sterling, I said, you talk a lot about your brand's reputation, but I have a document here that suggests your aesthetic visit from the Singapore investors was a smokescreen for something much larger. Bailiff, please hand the defense. Exhibit C. Marcus reached for the paper, his movements still sharp, but as his eyes scanned the lines, the blood drained from his face so quickly it was as if someone had pulled a plug. It wasn't a contract. It was a private internal memo sent from Marcus's personal encrypted account to the head of facility management 3 days before Evelyn was fired. The memo read, "The lobby renovation is over budget by $4 million. We need to cut operational costs immediately to show the investors a leaner balance sheet. Start with the legacy staff in janitorial. They have the highest pensions and the oldest contracts. Make an excuse. Clean house. If you are a senior who has worked for the same company for decades, only to feel a target on your back the moment you hit a certain age or salary bracket, this is the moment you've been waiting for." This wasn't about a leaking bucket. This was age discrimination, masked as an aesthetic choice. Mr. Sterling. I leaned over the bench, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. You didn't fire Evelyn Miller because she was an eyesore. You fired her because she was a cost. You fired her because she had earned 15 years of loyalty and a pension that you wanted to erase to make your stock look better for a 40-minute meeting. The gallery was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Evelyn Miller looked at Marcus, not with anger, but with a profound pity. She had spent 15 years protecting his building, and he had spent 5 minutes calculating how to destroy her life for a decimal point. That memo was a draft, Marcus stammered, his voice losing its polished edge. It was a strategic discussion. It had nothing to do with the specific incident in the lobby. Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Because the memo is dated the 12th, and Mrs. Miller was fired on the 15th, exactly 1 hour after she cleaned up a coffee spill that you ignored. You used a 6-8-year-old woman's act of kindness as a trap to execute a corporate execution. Marcus Sterling looked around the room. For the first time, he didn't look like a titan. He looked like a man caught in a storm with no umbrella. He looked at his gold watch, but it couldn't tell him how to get out of this. His untouchable status was evaporating, and the one question I was about to ask next was the one that would ensure he never looked at a janitor the same way again. Have you ever considered that the person you choose to ignore today might be the one who saved your life yesterday? Marcus Sterling was looking at the exit signs. He wanted to leave. He wanted this minor inconvenience to end so he could return to his world of digital numbers and cold glass. But I wasn't done. Justice isn't just about a paycheck. It's about the restoration of a person's place in the world. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice echoing with a new resonance, you look at Mrs. Miller and you see a janitor. You see a cost center on a spreadsheet. But let's talk about the Sterling name. Your father, Arthur Sterling, founded the company 40 years ago in a small garage, didn't he? Marcus looked up, his brows furrowing. My father is a legend in this city. What does he have to do with a personnel dispute? Everything, I replied. Because 40 years ago, when your father was struggling to keep the lights on, there was a young woman who worked 2 jobs to pay the rent for that garage. A woman who believed in his vision so much that when he couldn't pay his staff, she told him to pay her in hope instead of cash for 6 months. If you are a senior who remembers the value of a handshake and the meaning of loyalty before it became a buzzword in a corporate brochure, you will feel this in your soul. The world Marcus lives in has no room for history. It only has room for the now. But the now is built on the sacrifices of the then. I don't know what fairy tale you're telling, Judge, Marcus said, though his voice had lost its iron. It's not a fairy tale, Mr. Sterling. It's a bank record. Bailiff, please show the witness. Exhibit D. It was an old, yellowed piece of paper, a personal check for $500, dated 1984. It was signed by Evelyn Miller and made out to Arthur Sterling. On the memo line, in careful cursive handwriting, were the words, "For the dream." The courtroom went dead silent. Marcus stared at the check. The Titan was looking at the very foundation of his fortune. Evelyn Miller wasn't just a janitor. She was the silent investor who had kept his father's dream alive when the rest of the world had turned its back on him. And 15 years ago, when your father fell ill, he asked her to come back to the company, not as an executive, because she didn't want the spotlight, but as the guardian of the house. She chose to be the janitor because she wanted to walk the floors of the dream she helped build, to make sure it stayed clean and pure. She cleaned your floors, Marcus, I said, dropping the formal title. Not because she needed the money, though she did, but because she promised your father she would look after his legacy. And you fired her because her cardigan didn't match your Italian marble. Marcus looked at Evelyn. For the first time, he didn't look at her with contempt. He looked at her with a terrifying realization. In his quest to be untouchable, he had destroyed the very person who made him touch the sky. This is the TMAO of the soul, when ego becomes so thick you can no longer recognize your own benefactors. I didn't know, Marcus whispered. That is the point, Mr. Sterling, I replied. You didn't bother to know. You saw a uniform, not a human being. You saw a category, not a story. And now, the janitor you tried to erase is the only person who can save the Sterling name from the storm that is about to hit. I leaned forward, the one question finally hovering in the air like a lightning bolt. Tell me, Mr. Sterling, how does it feel to realize that every floor you've walked on with your $3,000 shoes was kept clean by the woman who gave you the shoes in the first place? Have you ever noticed how a building feels different when the truth starts to leak through the walls? Marcus Sterling looked like a man who was suddenly realized he was standing on thin ice in the middle of a bonfire. The check from 1984, the seat of the dream, was still lying on the table, glowing under the courtroom lights like a hot coal. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. His TMAO of ego had been so high for so long that his vocal cords had forgotten how to utter the word sorry. Judge, Marcus's lawyer interjected, his voice shaking. This check, it's historical, it's sentimental. It doesn't change the legality of the termination. My client is a CEO, not a historian. He has a duty to his shareholders to maintain a certain standard. I looked at the lawyer, then back at Marcus. Standard? Mr. Sterling, let's talk about your standard. While you were busy firing the woman who funded your father's life, you were also busy preparing a press release for the Singapore investors, claiming that Sterling Tech is a family-first company built on generational integrity. Am I correct? Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Well, I continued, justice has a funny way of inviting itself to the party. Bailiff, please activate the live feed from the hallway. The monitor switched to the area outside the courtroom. It wasn't just the media waiting out there anymore. There were dozens of people, some in suits, but most in uniforms. Security guards, delivery drivers, other janitors from the business district, and even a few of Marcus's own engineers. They were holding signs. One of them caught the camera's eye. I am Evelyn. We built this. If you are a worker who has ever felt like just a number on a badge, like a cog in a machine that would replace you in a heartbeat, then you know the power of that moment. This is the awakening. When the invisibles decide to become seen. Mr. Sterling, I said, your aesthetic choice has become a public relations nightmare. But it gets worse. You see, when you directed your legal team to withhold Mrs. Miller's pay, you cited a disparagement clause. You claimed she hurt the brand. But I have here the transcripts from the Singapore delegation's exit interview. I opened the folder. The lead investor, Mr. Tan, wrote this. We were impressed by the technology, but deeply disturbed by the CEO's behavior toward a senior staff member in the lobby. If a leader treats his foundation with such contempt, he will eventually treat his partners the same way. We are withdrawing our $4 million investment effective immediately. The very thing Marcus tried to save the budget, the aesthetic, the deal was the very thing he destroyed the moment he called Evelyn that. He hadn't just lost a janitor, he had lost his future. His untouchable status didn't just crack, it pulverized into dust. I leaned over the bench, looking Marcus directly in the eye. Your father's dream was built on a $500 check and a lot of heart. Your empire is being dismantled by a $20 million lobby and a total lack of soul. Tell me, Marcus, now that the investors are gone and the cameras are rolling, do you still think Mrs. Miller is the one who doesn't fit in that building? Have you ever felt the air in a room change right before a storm breaks? That moment when the pressure is so high, you can feel it in your very bones? Marcus Sterling was no longer looking at his Patek Philippe. The gold watch that he used to measure his $5,000 an hour time now seemed like a heavy shackle. He sat there, his tailored shoulders slumped, finally realizing that in this courtroom, the Italian marble he loved so much was just cold stone, and it was the woman in the faded cardigan who held the warmth and the truth. Mr. Sterling, I began, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more power than a shout, you came here today asking me to expedite this case. You wanted to get back to your billion-dollar world because you thought Evelyn Miller's life was a distraction. But I have one final piece of evidence that wasn't in the folder. It was in the history of this very building. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a small tarnished silver key. Do you know what this is, Marcus? This is the key to the backup generator room of your father's first office. The office you were going to lose 20 years ago during the Great Blackout, when the servers were about to overheat and destroy every bit of data your father had built. Do you remember who stayed behind? Who stayed in that basement for 14 hours, hand-pumping the cooling system because the automatic switch failed? Marcus looked at the key, then at Evelyn. His mouth opened, but only a dry rasp came out. It was Evelyn, I said. She didn't just fund the dream, she saved it from burning down while you were away at your elite boarding school. She has been the silent guardian of the Sterling name since before you knew how to tie your own shoes. If you are a grandparent who has ever quietly fixed a problem for your children or grandchildren, never asking for credit, only to be forgotten when things got fancy, then this moment is for you. This is the heartbreaker. The realization that the people we discard are often the ones who carried us on their backs when we were too small to walk. And now, for the question you've been avoiding all morning, I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. Mr. Sterling, you fired her for ruining the aesthetic of your lobby. But tell me, if Evelyn Miller hadn't knelt on those old, tired knees 40 years ago to save your father and 14 hours 20 years ago to save his data, would there even be a lobby for you to stand in today? Marcus broke. The Titan didn't just fail, he dissolved. A single tear, not a calculated corporate tear, but one of genuine, bone-deep shame, tracked down his face. He looked at Evelyn, and for the first time in his adult life, he didn't see a janitor. He saw a savior. I have no answer, Your Honor, he whispered. I didn't think so, I replied, because there is no logic that justifies arrogance over gratitude. I picked up my gavel. The atmosphere was electric. Marcus Sterling, I am not just ruling on a contract today. I am ruling on the soul of this city. I find you in direct violation of labor statutes, but more importantly, I find you guilty of a profound moral bankruptcy. I began to write the final order, the pen scratching loudly in the absolute silence. I ordered the immediate reinstatement of Evelyn Miller, not as a janitor, but as the emeritus guardian of the Sterling legacy with a salary equal to a senior vice president, backdated for 5 years. I ordered Marcus to personally issue a public apology in that very lobby, and I referred his cost-cutting memo to the State Labor Board for a full audit of his company's age discrimination practices. This case is not just closed, Mr. Sterling, I said, the gavel poised in the air. It is a monument, and from now on, every time you walk across that marble floor, I want you to look down and remember whose knees made it possible for you to stand so tall. Have you ever walked through a city at night and realized that every shining window, every clean street, and every polished floor is a testament to someone who worked while the world slept? The courtroom was quiet as the echoes of the gavel finally faded. Marcus Sterling didn't move. He sat there, looking at the tarnished silver key and the yellowed check, the two items that had dismantled his $20 million ego. He had spent his life trying to build a future that was flawless, only to realize he had been destroying the very roots that kept him upright. Evelyn Miller stood up slowly. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't look at the crowd cheering for her. She walked over to Marcus. The gallery held its breath, expecting a confrontation, a final word of anger. But Evelyn just reached out and placed her hand on his tailored shoulder, the hand with the swollen knuckles and the thin, hard-working skin. Marcus, she said, her voice a gentle anchor in the storm, your father didn't build this company for the Italian marble. He built it so we could all have a place where we belonged. Don't let the shine blind you to the soul. If you are watching this, and you are part of that generation that knows what it means to build something from nothing, to sacrifice your knees, your backs, and your sleep for the sake of a dream, then this story is dedicated to you. You are not that. You are not an eyesore or a cost center. You are the foundation. And as Marcus Sterling learned today, when you try to remove the foundation to make the building look better, the whole structure eventually comes crashing down. The Sterling Tech lobby looks different now. There is still white marble, and it still shines. But next to the golden reception desk, there is a small, framed black and white photograph of a garage and a silver key. And every morning at 6 a.m., when the emeritus guardian Evelyn Miller walks through those doors, the CEO, the man who once thought he was untouchable, is there to open the door for her. He finally learned that the most important aesthetic a leader can have is gratitude. I want to speak to you directly now. We live in a world that often moves too fast to see the people who make it run. We value the new and the shiny while overlooking the loyal and the true. But in this courtroom and on this channel, we believe in a different standard. We believe that character is the only currency that never devalues. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think of a parent, a grandparent, or a silent hero in your own life, don't let the moment pass. Share this video. Let's send a message to every Marcuses out there that we are watching, and we remember who built the world. Subscribe to our channel to stand with us. We are more than just stories. We are a community that protects the values of dignity, hard work, and justice. Click the notification bell so you never miss a moment where power is held accountable and the invisible are finally seen. Thank you for watching. I am Judge Judy, and I will be here tomorrow. The law will be here, and the truth will always find its way home.